I think most people want to feel utilized. They want to learn, they want to be successful. And so if I had somebody new coming in and they were trying to make this type of transition, then I would be using it as a coaching moment. You can't figure out how to motivate somebody if you don't know who they are. So you kind of coach them through, like, how do you connect? And in that, if you're trying to tell somebody how to be an influencer, what my advice would be to relationship build and to kind of sit back and try to understand what you've just inherited so that you can put together your plan of attack.
This is Facility Rockstars, the podcast that celebrates the unsung heroes of our daily lives, facility professionals. I'm your host, Jay Culbert. Join me as we honor these great leaders, sharing stories, insights, and expertise that empower us all to learn and grow together. Facility Rockstars is sponsored by Coludus, operating the way you operate in order to make your life easier. Welcome back to Facility Rockstars. I'm your host, Jay Culbert, and today we are going to talk about a truly universal topic, regardless if you're talking about sports, biotech, aerospace, or otherwise. Many, many, many of us are faced with this, and our guest today is really going to take a deep dive and tell us about his experience. That said, our guest today is a tech-savvy leader leveraging networking for success. He is a skilled educator, adept at uniting teams for strategic goals. He's been in the field of EH&S for 19 years. He holds an MBA from the University of California. He also has a master's degree in biotech from Harvard University, and he's currently the senior manager of facility operations at Regeneron. Please welcome Barton Nielsen to the show. Welcome, Barton.
Thank you very much. Great to be here.
I love your topic. I can't wait to dig in. So without further ado, we're going to talk about transition from an individual contributor to leader of a team and how that can apply to life and your whole story around that. So how would you like to open that, Barton?
Oh, well, I one reason why I love this topic is because I've lived it and I've had some challenges along the way. So I feel it feels close and special to me to make sure I tell people about it because I think it is important. I learned the hard way, and I had a lot of people try to tell me how to become a leader. And in fact, they didn't use the word leader; they would say influencer, more like informal authority type stuff. But it's not something you can really be told. So I had an experience where I was leading safety for a large manufacturing facility, and it was a new experience. And I had taken this role as a step up into senior management. I was reporting to the general manager of this facility, and um, and I was thrust into different activities that I wasn't used to, and part of that was and part of the message that my boss gave me at the time was that this was a role of an influencer leader, not individual contributor. And I had just come from a role where I was the individual contributor for safety at a different manufacturing site, and it wasn't super clear to me what she meant exactly. And so as I went through my time at this facility, I quickly learned that it being an individual trying to run it all by yourself, it was pretty impossible. Unfortunately, by the time I learned all the lessons that were important, it was time for me to leave that place. But it was really hard when you take a role, as I did, and it's a step up into what you would consider to be leadership, and you have a team and you have a lot of responsibility. The expectation isn't that you're supposed to do it all yourself. And I don't think I ever would have said I was going to do it all myself, but I ended up trying to do it all myself. And there was a lot of reasons for that. One of them, though, that I had control over was because that's what I was used to. And I got kind of put myself into a bit of a corner. And I didn't really help myself much because I was partly unaware of what I was getting myself into.
I think if I could, Barton, I think that's a really good point you just made. You did it because it's what you were used to. So what that makes me think about is behavioral change and how do you manage that? Does that land for you?
Sure. I mean, it's hard to know what you don't know, so you need help. I At the time I was in my MBA program, so the help I got at that time was from other students in my cohort and the professors that were doing the mentoring and coaching. And that was about it. I had folks at that employer reach out and help me, but I guess I couldn't find a way to see through the woods, like I couldn't find the light. I was given a really heavy workload. I wouldn't say that it was the best place to work in the world, but all that being said is I still didn't really manage it the way that I could have to be successful or as successful as I could have been.
Hmm.
Um, I certainly could have protected myself a little bit better. And what actually happened was this site was undergoing a change, and this was a site that was part of a large corporate structure. And what I had done to get myself into a corner, back myself into a corner, was I kind of over promised and under delivered.
Hmm.
Um, and I there was no way that I was ever gonna get done the work that I had hoped to get done and that I was asked to get done. And I could have done myself a lot of favors by communicating that early to my manager, to the general manager.
Hmm.
I could have set myself up for more success if I had tried to cultivate a better relationship with her. I'm used to having a relationship with folks. I usually get along with everyone. Hopefully, folks on this show agree.
I think we
Um,
talked for 45 minutes and didn't realize it was over 5 minutes the first time we got
I'm
on the
glad that
phone.
we get
So,
along at least. So she never wanted to get to know me, and I had a hard
mhm.
time getting to know her. And then we just didn't have a relationship that was very fluid and very communicative. So when I started to get into a pinch, I didn't have an easy way to turn to her, especially because she was the one asking for everything, and she was the one expecting results. And so that made me feel very uncomfortable, and that made me try to get it done without I was trying to be a stay on her good side, I guess. I'm not,
Mhm.
I kind of receded a bit into my cave and tried to get it done. And then by the time I came out, it was too late.
Barton, I think you had mentioned something about saying yes when you probably should say no. And I may not remember that correctly, but I think you might have touched on that at some point in our
Of
discussion.
course. I mean, this is related to that. So I met with folks in along this journey, it was about a year and a half. I did meet with a few other. I was a EH&S professional at the time, and so I met with a different EH&S leader from a different manufacturing facility, and I showed him what I had to do.
Mhm.
I also met with the EH&S leader for the Americas of this corporation, and she knew what I had to do or what was on the list. And they both made comments like, "This is a pretty long list. Are you sure you're up for it? Are you sure it's possible? Like like this seems more like a 3 year plan versus a 1 year plan." And I was a bit naive in thinking, well, I'll do my best. Let's just get it done. But that doesn't fly when someone has to report those types of results up the ladder within a large organization, and there are reports that's basically all they get to learn about you is these reports of your results. And if you say you're going to get something done and then you don't, it looks like you didn't do anything, or it looks
Sure.
like you failed.
Hmm.
And um and so I could have set myself up better by setting expectations better, by when I realized, especially after the advice I got, that this workload wasn't possible without help. And this kind of gets into going from the individual to the leader and or influencer,
Hmm.
and influencing others around you to participate. Because in this organization, the message was safety is everybody's responsibility. We should all participate in it. And so the expectation of the general manager was I should go out and get other employees or other functions to support the efforts that I had going on. And I had never done that before. So that was part of the problem. But then it was also just an uncomfortable process. So it's not saying yes when you should say no. It was almost like I was afraid to say no.
Well, I think if I may, I think it's such a universal thing, and even look at say professional football. Yes, we're in Boston, so I'll say, in the past, Tom Brady, would he be the great coach? Who knows? He was the best quarterback, the best player, but would he know how to behave as a coach? And I think, I something maybe I think we talked about this too, is setting expectations and learning to plan better and really setting up like you went to outside sources. That was good on you to get advice from peers, in my opinion. Right. And then, but how do you actually put all of that change into effect and use new skills?
I took a couple years off and I got to watch kids and think about this for a while, and I really did because it bothered me for a long time. Um, because I don't like to fail. I'm not used to it. I'm used to getting along with people, and so it really bothered me. And I also wanted to still grow in my career, and so I took a lot of those messages, even though I may not have really enjoyed working there anyways. I still took a lot of those lessons because I knew that I still had a lot of things to improve. And so, I found myself a couple years later in this new role that I'm in now at Decibel. And I took a role. It wasn't just a safety role this time. I took a role as the associate director of facilities, and within Decibel that kind of meant operation, like an operations leader. And so I was involved in lots of things. The facility wasn't huge, and so within facilities, you were in charge of the entire operation for the most part, in the facility itself,
Mhm.
safety, security, and all that. And so when I took this new role, and it was again, it was another leadership type of role. I approached it a little differently. I wasn't about to put myself in the same position again. I um I understood that it wasn't my job to do everything, and I didn't want to do everything anymore. It's something, I had put a bad taste in my mouth. And so you want to be able to build a team around you that wants to help. And so it's not like you can just get the job and start telling people what to do, because that doesn't tend to work well if they don't, have a relationship with folks. So, I took the new role, and I genuinely tried to, as I usually do, connect with folks. And then through the teams, and was able to start executing safety related stuff. And we have a consultant, but also the scientists were very helpful. We have security issues, um, but again, um, delegating to the security
Hmm.
team. So then where I started working was acquired, and now I'm working for this large organization, Regeneron,
Hmm.
much larger than Decibel. Decibel was about 70 people. Regeneron's about 17,000 people. And so now we're this small site as part of Regeneron. And of course, Regeneron does things differently. And so now this is even more important because now I'm working the facilities department isn't just the facilities department. There's six sub departments within that. And so now, being the operational lead for this site, I have six departments. I've dotted lines to six departments, and and they all have a different way of doing things. They're all responsible for their functions. For example, EH&S is managed by EH&S, so they don't necessarily want me to continue doing things the way that we were doing things. So now I need EH&S to help.
Hmm.
Security is the same. Anything that's a capital purchase has to go through the capital projects team. So I'm interacting with them. Um, I
Can I
mean,
touch on that for a second? There's
sure.
one on the capital projects. I remember in previous discussions we've talked about like you like looking at things as an engineer, yet you're not an engineer. If I tell me if I'm not remembering
Well,
correctly.
right. I don't know that I'm the typical facilities person. I got all my education is in the biological sciences, and,
Mhm.
my MBA. And so I got a microbiology degree. I thought I'd be a scientist, and then I was working in safety, and I got the master's in science because I wanted to I wanted to show that I was competent as I walked through labs and interacted with other scientists. And those things worked well for me. But I'm in the facilities world, and the department I'm in specifically is really the MEP management department. So doing all the mechanical stuff. And I'm not an engineer. You wouldn't ask me to fix a piece of equipment. Um, but I certainly need to know who to ask. I need to know what the equipment
Hmm.
does.
Hmm.
And so, that limits me in my abilities. And that means especially in this type of role now, I need to make sure I know who to ask. I mean, to have a team that's willing to work with me,
Well,
as a
I think that,
non-engineer.
yeah, well,
Uh,
I think, Barton, if I could, that's the distinction there, and credit to you, because the whole storyline was, individual contributor, and then you're not that engineer that's going to go fix a piece of equipment, yet you've built a network or a shell around you of resources, and you have a capital projects or engineering department, right, that can do that for you, and you can direct that. If I'm hearing this correctly.
Well, sure, they don't work for me, but I do get to influence how they get things done. Like if we have to buy a piece of equipment, a large piece of equipment, they have to set it all up, but then they
Hmm.
funnel it through us, but they set it up with us. So they can't do any of the work without our input.
So
They
is it
and
safe to say you've gone from doing everything yourself to having what I'm hearing about 5 or 6 different resource points to now transition into that leader or influencer versus individual contributor in a facilities role?
yeah, and even more. I mean, that's just within facilities. I'm in the smaller site, so I'm still also involved in the R&D operations, which doesn't fall under facilities at Regeneron. I'm, I work with our executive administrator to help do office management stuff. Uh, so there, it kind of in this type of facility, you wear lots of hats. And it's a little bit of a challenge when you work at a company where most people don't wear lots of hats. And I have to be careful about how I go about my day because there's certain things that I used to do that aren't acceptable anymore. Small company type stuff when it comes to procuring things or having
Mm-hmm.
visitors come through. Um, and so it's taken a lot of coordination, but I feel like I've done well at getting to know who I need to go to get what I need. Um, and we have a good small team on site that is pretty cohesive. We communicate very well. We meet at least once a week, and we've really gotten to know each other very well. So like we all have specific roles, but again, we wear multiple hats. So sometimes you're not really doing what your job description says.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but we do a pretty good job of getting stuff done. It's kind of a small company mentality, I suppose.
Good for you.
Um, it's it's I think it's fun. But the challenge is trying to align that with the new larger um, headquarters,
Sure.
of Regeneron, and we're kind of working through all that. It's been 6 months since the transition.
Oh, so it's still very new.
Yeah.
So, what advice, if there were any, like, cut? I mean, you've given us so many things that can be used, but if you had a peer or one of our listeners that was at the point where they were about to join, say, when you joined Decibel, and you started to really make that transition, you're like, all right, there's a lot of hats. I can't do all of this. What advice would you give someone in that transition role to, pivot?
I think most people they want to feel utilized. They want to learn. Um, they want to be successful. And so if I had somebody new coming in and they were trying to make this type of transition, then I would be using it as a coaching moment. I did this the other day with someone at a different Regeneron site. This person seemed to be a new people leader, and this person was talking about another employee they had that just seemed in the dumps. That because of the acquisition, because this was a site that was also acquired, and they laid off some of their coworkers, and so folks over there were a little disgruntled. But so this new people leader was telling me this story about how she couldn't connect with this person, and she just didn't know why he wasn't motivated and didn't know why he wasn't doing everything. And she's like, I want to find out how to get them all energized. And the first thing I said was, are you sure it's work related? You know, like,
Hmm.
um, you got to get to know the person. You like, there's so many things that could be wrong with anybody, anytime. And I try not to assume anything about a person. If they're not performing, I try not to assume that they're doing a bad job. I usually try to come up before I know the story. I usually come up with some reason why in their personal life they can't do it. Um, but the point is get to know the person first. You know, you can't figure out how to motivate somebody if you don't know who they are, if you don't know if it's a problem, if you don't know what the problem is. So you kind of coach them through, like, how do you connect? And in that, if you're trying to tell somebody how to be an influencer, so then and I wouldn't say I'm the best resource in all this either, but my advice would be to relationship build and to kind of sit back and try to understand what you've just inherited so that you can plan your way, your plan, so you can put together your plan of attack.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then you can get off to a nice smooth start. You know, that's not something I did in that transition role that we talked about earlier in the show. You know, I didn't take the time I should have to understand the role and understand the expectations.
Well, then, would it be fair to say that maybe is a piece of the advice? Take the time to understand the role and the expectations.
Yeah, I mean, there's a book called The First 90 Days. It's
Hmm.
that goes into it pretty well. And it really just gives you a plan. Um, tells you how to plan your first 90 days for success. Um, and so it's that type of idea. You know, there is a way, and I can't really remember all the different points, but you know, break your first 90 days into three sections, and part of that is get to know the people, part of that is get to know the programs, the culture, especially if you're in a leadership role. It's even more important to do those things. Um, so that way you can get off on the right foot and people will respect you and follow you, you know, or at least get prepared to.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Barton, it's great. This is I'm kind of I usually take notes, right? And whether I always go back to them or not, but some of the key points I'm hearing is, again, what going back to what you were used to, you or anybody, because again, I'm going to say this is a very universal, clearly a very universal, we could say issue or opportunity for people, right, to transition from being great at doing something to helping a group be great at doing something. And communicate early and often. I like what you just said, people, programs, and culture, and get to know all of that. Now, I've never read that book, so I'm going to go hunt it. I'm going to hunt it down now. So
it's short, so it's not a hard read.
great.
Um, but yeah, it's a constant learning process. I mean, you know, I look back at my some of my experiences and they were very painful, but the silver lining is, you know, you learn something from them
Hmm.
and I want to take away something. I don't want to just throw it in the trash and forget about it as much as I didn't like it. But so you try to take something from it and change for the better. It works well. Like you can even practice doing it. I mean, delegating stuff isn't not it can be messy, right? You can overdo it.
Hmm.
You can ask somebody to do something that maybe you shouldn't, or maybe they don't want to. And you know, so there's of course navigating this leadership type of stuff, but you got to practice it. So, you know, and then that was another, you know, I remember being young and when I first started working out of college and I was at Triumvirate and where I know another one of your guests used to work
Hmm.
and they hire a lot of young, bright people and so you're motivated and then they show you this company that was built on these younger folks and all you want to do is grow and lead something or get a better job or whatever it might be. And so I had this attitude where I basically thought I should I I probably thought I could be any type of leader. I'm like, you look at a job and you're like, how hard can that be? And so I had this type of dumb attitude of wanting these jobs, and basically it caught up with me eventually, and I didn't know what to do
Mm,
finally. Um, and so now I know the difference. Like you can't just jump in cold. I suppose some people could, but I can't. I couldn't. I really needed either the learning experience or better coaching or both. Some people told me I was set up to fail, so maybe
mm,
that's true. But
mm.
I still I know that there were things I could have done better. So yeah.
Well, thank you very much for the way you're speaking about this because I know I appreciate, I'm sure everyone listening appreciates your humble honesty and your total transparency about your own journey and how, you felt the sting of what you called failure, but I think, like you said, you learned something from it. It's great to learn from your journey, Barton. So yeah, I definitely appreciate that.
Thank you.
Of course. No, no, no. Thank you. So we've learned from you for I don't know how long now, like a lot of like, and just recap again, individual contributor to people leader or influencer, and we're all faced with that. Most of us are faced with that at some point in our career if we choose to be. So this is very helpful. Um, I want to ask you a little bit about you as well. So what
Sure.
makes Barton tick? Like you brought us back to your early, like right out of school into triumvirate and like that. But do you want to go back further, fast forward? Tell us about you.
I grew up in a military community, so I would say, I grew up, my parents were teachers for the Department of Defense, and they met in Germany, and they got married in Germany. So I was born in Germany at an army hospital, and I grew up over there on like for the most part near an Air Force base, Ramstein Air Force Base. And I stayed there till I graduated high school. So I lived within this military community in Germany for 18 years. Um and I think that had a profound impact on me. Like I tend to see things, I tend to want to see things from a more global perspective. I didn't grow up with like a hometown in the US.
Hmm.
Um, we always visited Florida because that's where my family's from. Um, but I had a very like national type of perspective. So like when I then and I noticed that it was different than when I came back to the States because I talk about it being the States and everyone's talking about it being like Florida or Massachusetts or wherever it is.
Sure.
I remember people thinking it sounded funny that I would call it the States. Um and It was kind of a hard, now that I'm reflecting on it, I liked it at the time because I was a young kid in Germany and was playing soccer and all that kind of stuff. But now that look back, it was a hard way to grow up. All my friends moved every 3 years,
Hmm.
unless they were teacher kids like me. And We were away from family all the time. I mean, I had my mom and dad and my sister, but I really didn't grow up around anybody else from my family.
Teacher kids like you, is that because your parents, because they were teachers, weren't always moving around? They were
Right.
stationed right there.
Yeah,
Yep.
Department of Defense, you're a civilian, so you don't get relocated like the
Hmm.
military does.
Hmm.
I grew up kind of in a support type of environment. My parents are teachers. They like teaching people stuff. You're basically taking care of, children. Um, I'm in a military community. It's all about, I don't know. I mean, the way I viewed it as a young person was we're helping people. We were in Germany because of World War II and the Cold War, and that's when the whole Cold War thing was happening. Um, and I've kind of found myself in these type of support roles no matter where I go. I was doing safety a lot, taking care of people, and it moved into support services for these organizations that I worked for. And that's kind of how I went from, taking care of people and safety and the environment. And then I wanted to continue to grow, and EHS tends to be within facilities. So, I then I see facilities, and so I'm like, let's go there. I want to I want to run all of it at some point. And um And so I started taking on responsibilities within facilities, but it's always along the lines of support and service.
Mm.
And and sometimes that can wear on you, but it's nice when you work for a company that takes care of you, especially and it's nice to do it for a company that's successful. And it can be hard to find one of those in biotech.
I think your outlook on say the world or those around you is fantastic. Support and service. Those are the words I'm hearing. And I didn't know that about your background. I mean, I know we haven't known each other too long now, but 18 years in Germany, and what a different perspective on the world is what I'm hearing too.
Yeah. I would be German if I suppose I'd have dual citizenship if Germany allowed that, but they don't.
Hmm.
So, you know, I, but people think I'm like half German. I'm afraid to speak German now. It's been too long. So I embarrass myself in front of Germans. Um, yeah,
And you
talk
have
all this.
two little kids,
I do. I have a
right?
3-year-old and a 6-year-old, both boys.
Both boys.
Um,
Yep. Keep
I
you
feel
busy.
I feel like you might see some bags under my eyes, and that's because we're still getting over jet lag from our week away last week. But they are um, they are full of energy, especially at night.
They'll keep you young.
Yeah,
They'll keep
they
you
keep you
young
young until they
and
age you.
tired. Right. Martin, any other nuggets for the audience? Just this is a story we have not covered or talked about on the podcast yet on the show, and I think it's just very, very important. And maybe it deserves a second segment at some point, but any other like high level takeaways, for the audience from you?
Another snippet that I didn't bring up was um just I guess not like I say this like be honest and truthful. Not that like I would lie, but I think sometimes you kind of lie by omission, and that's something else. I I when I wouldn't I had a hard time communicating my difficulties, and so instead of communicating them, I just wouldn't say stuff.
Mm,
And now a difference now is that I say everything, and I say it pretty bluntly. And that might not work for a lot of people, but it tends to not get me into trouble because then there's no way that anybody's uninformed. And so you don't want to surprise people. Like we said, communicate early and often. Um,
hmm.
and don't sugarcoat stuff. I suppose that always could be handled differently depending on the situation you're in, but get it out before it's too late.
Yeah,
Um, and I even now in this transition role at Regeneron, there have been some challenges and there have been some personality conflicts, I would say. Um, but we're still honest and professional. We still say everything we need to say so that it's all on the table, that nobody feels like anything isn't being communicated, and that has so far it's worked very well.
that's fantastic because it's clarity. I like there's no surprises. No, it might not feel good or sound good right when it's delivered or heard, but yeah, you're not leaving anything to question. I like what you said there too. Like don't lie by omission because maybe people are doing that, not even realizing that we're doing it. So, um, yeah, very, very good points.
Yeah.
If the audience wanted to learn more, I mean, we've taken some time here, but there's so much more that maybe they'd want to ask you. What's the best way to get in touch with you, Barton?
My email or LinkedIn. I respond to my LinkedIn messages if they're not from a salesperson. So if somebody writes me on LinkedIn, I'll write them back if they ask me, something besides wanting to try a product. Or you can use my Regeneron email. It's my first name and my last name. It's richard.nielsen@regeneron.com.
Perfect.
And my LinkedIn is R. Barton Nielsen.
We might have met on LinkedIn. I think that's how
That
we
is how we
connected,
met.
actually. Awesome.
See, I wrote back to you, didn't I?
You did. Yes, you did. Thank
See,
you.
but I don't write back to very many people.
I'm honored. Thank you so much. Thank you. You're a pleasure to speak with. You're a wealth of knowledge. Barton, thank you so much for being on the show.
Of course, I really enjoyed it. I hope you invite me back.
Oh, absolutely. And there'll be other things too. And for the audience, I hope you learned something today. Maybe you laughed. If you want to learn more, you know how to get in touch with Barton. Tell a friend if you liked the show. Barton, thank you again. And this is another Facility Rockstars episode in the books. We'll see you next time. It's a wrap. Another episode of Facility Rockstars is in the books. Facility Rockstars is sponsored by Colutus, operating the way you operate in order to make your life easier. Until next time, facilitate and rock on.